What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2018 Jeep Wrangler Sport. Huge thanks to Jeep for providing me with this very nice brand new Wrangler to review for you guys today. So about the 2018 Wrangler, well, even though it looks very similar to the old one, it is entirely new. And it actually, I really like the changes they made to it. Now you'd have to be a Jeep expert really to even notice the changes, but a few of the changes that I really like right up front is the headlights now are a little bit larger, and you can see they kind of bleed into the grille there a little bit, and that grille is a little bit larger as well. You can see that the turn signals are now located in the front fenders there instead of in the front grille like they used to be. But overall, it's still a very familiar shape, very familiar looks. Still has the hood latches that are external here, and this one has the standard headlights, which have the cool little Easter egg of the Jeep emblem there within them. But you can actually get ones with LED rings as well, which is a very cool additional touch that this one unfortunately does not have. But coming down to the sides here, a couple new things you'll see is this little fender vent, which actually does help evacuate air from under the hood there, and so it helps this hood to not flutter as much under speed. Of course, the hood will fold backwards as much as you'd like. Also, the windshield still folds down, the doors still come off. All those typical Jeep traits that you used to have with the Wrangler, you still do have here on the 2018s. They just kept everything that everyone loved about the Wrangler and just improved all the things that could use improvement, really. Going down to the sides there, you'll see the optional hardtop that this one has, and that is still completely removable, so it can be a convertible there with a little bit of effort, but still much easier than it was on prior Wranglers there. Going out to the back, you'll see some new tail lamp designs there, which are LED on this one, the way that it's optioned, and look very good there. I like how it's kind of a retro gas canister type of look to them, and a very cool look nonetheless. You have the exposed spare tire, which now has an integrated backup camera in the middle there, which is a cool little touch. But it is actually a little bit longer as well. I think they said it's about 2.5 inches longer. The wheelbase itself is about 1 inch longer, so it gives you better stability, but it also gives you a little bit more room inside. And overall, I still think it's just a really great looking vehicle. It's clearly retro, but I think that that's what gives it so much charm. Right, for the interior of the 2018 Wrangler here, well, it's very nicely updated here for the all-new Wrangler. So anyway, the first things first, sitting down on these seats. Now, this is the Sport model, which is basically the base trim. Now, this has a lot of options added back into it, so this isn't really an exact representation of a base interior, but this does show you the base cloth seats that you get here, which are a nice cloth. They're pretty smooth, not too rough or anything. The bolstering's pretty mild, but that's what you would expect out of a Jeep Wrangler. You wouldn't expect really anything too sporty, and so very relaxed bolstering, but they are very comfortable seats. And this one does have the climate pack, so it has heated front seats as well, which is nice to have. But yeah, they're comfortable. They're manual adjustments still and all that kind of stuff, but overall pretty good seats. Next, the steering wheel in the Wrangler, which is all new and a really nice wheel, leather wrapped here. Even in the Sport model, has a really nice 9-3 grip. Has some minor 10 and 2 notches here, but just a really good feeling wheel. It has a few buttons here that are nice and large and easy to navigate. It's nice, like all other FCA products. You have the little rockers on the back of the wheel for changing the radio station and the volume, which is good to have that. But overall, it's a nice looking wheel and just great to use. Next to the gauges here in the Wrangler, which are again nicely improved here for 2018. So you still have the analog speedometer and tachometer, but then in the middle there you have a nice large digital portion, very similar to what you see in a lot of other Jeeps, and that'll have a digital speedometer in there. It's got all your basic vehicle info. It also has a couple cool little off-road things there as far as the angle that you're at, and the four-wheel drive modes, all those types of things there. And then there's also all the other basics for audio and all that type of stuff. And so a nice good amount of information in there. You also, to the left, within the tachometer ring there, you'll also have your little display showing you what mode your four-wheel drive system is in. And so good to have all that information, and it's clear and easy to use. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, this is the largest improvement in my opinion, is the infotainment system. Thankfully, they improved it here. Now it is a 7-inch Uconnect screen. It's not the large 8.4-inch you get in a lot of the other FCA products, but it still runs the same software, still has the same great high resolution, still so far has been very snappy, responsive. It still has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it's a perfectly large enough screen. It's a great really with the way that it works. All the same great menus, everything's laid out very logically, and just very easy to use, and I absolutely love these Uconnect screens, so I'm so happy that that is now in this. Now, you don't get Apple CarPlay with the base infotainment system. This is the entertainment package or whatever, which is an extra $1,000 to get this screen, but it's well worth the $1,000, trust me. Coming down, you have your climate control knob and also a volume and tune knob, which are nice and large and feel pretty good actually. I like the little rivets you have here within this little area, and a good assortment of buttons here, but nothing too overwhelming. So you have your hill descent control, also a button to turn off your auto stop start, which is a new thing on 2018. So thankfully, at least you can turn that off. And so nicely condensed with all that info there. And then coming down, you have a traditional power outlet. You have your window switches because, of course, these doors come off completely. So, you have to have your window switches here in the middle, I suppose. So cool little thing there. And then you have also all your media hookups. You have an auxiliary jack, USB jack, and a micro USB jack, I believe, there. So nice to have all of those. And then coming down, you'll see your four-wheel drive control. And that takes a good amount of muscle, though, to get it into the different gears, I will say. But good to have that. And then of course your gear shifter, which is nice and chunky, has some nice metal trim rings around it here at the bottom, and also does allow you to do manual shifting as well with that. So good to have that as well. As far as storage space in the 2018 Wrangler, well, it's not bad. So anyway, first thing in the doors here, you just have a net, which expands enough that you could fit a bottle in there, maps, whatever you want to put in there. It's good to have that. Coming over to the center here, you just have this little, it's very shallow but very wide opening, but it's not deep enough for a smartphone, unfortunately. But good to have that for putting basics, the key, things like that in there if you'd like. But wish that was a little more usable. Coming towards the back here, you have your two cup holders and another little slot in the middle here, which I suppose is for a smartphone or something you could mount in there. And so good to have those. And then you have the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded, but honestly, the material feels pretty cheap here, at least in the sport model. It's just some type of vinyl. But anyway, this has two layers here, so you can open up the top level here, and you'll see a shallow little area where you could put a smartphone or something like that in there, and you have little indents for cord pass through. And also that's where you'll find your tools that Jeep gives you here to take off this roof. So nice to have those included. Then anyway, you open up this bottom portion here, and it's very deep, a large, huge opening. And you also have another USB jack in there, but just a massive amount of space in there. So that makes up for any other shortcomings in the front here. You have plenty of storage in here, and so overall, all things considered, it's an excellent vehicle as far as storage space is concerned. Backseat space here in the Wrangler two-door is a pretty nice back seat, all things considered again. So, it's a little bit tight, but this is a smaller vehicle, but, I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I have about an inch of legroom to spare there, not a lot of space, and you do have air vents, though, back there for rear occupants and two cup holders, so good to have that there, but otherwise, just a pretty basic back seat. But the only problem with the back seat is how difficult it is to get back there. So this front seat, it's not very smooth in its movement whenever you're trying to slide that front seat forward in order to get to the back. I was tugging on it, and it's never very smooth, and the little handle you're supposed to be able to use to just sling it forward doesn't always work the way you expect it to. And so overall, it's a little tricky to actually get back there, unfortunately. And so because of that, I don't think it's a back seat you want to use on a regular basis. But to use in a pinch, it's good to have a back seat. But of course, if you do plan to carry more than two people in your Jeep, I would highly recommend getting the four-door version instead. Another thing that's a little disappointing about the Wrangler is the trunk space in it. So a very small trunk area there. And again, we're talking about a very boxy, small little two-door here, but still, it's really not even enough to fit a full week's worth of groceries. It's kind of a tight space there. I do like how, the bottom part swings out and then the top part opens up. You could fit, I think you can fit two full-size suitcases if you stand them up back there. So it is practical for something like that. But, just not a lot of floor space, unfortunately. Now, thankfully, it is very easy to fold that rear seat forward. You can fold it down, then you can also flip it up, and it does that very easily and almost automatically. And so once you have that out of the way, then you have a ton of space, comparable with any mid-size SUV, really. And so that makes it a whole lot more usable. If you don't need those rear seats, then you have no issues there whatsoever. But otherwise, like I said, just a little bit limited on space there. And again, I believe the four-door version is better in that regard. And so another reason to consider the four-door version if you do want the additional practicality. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Jeep Wrangler has this new Jeep key. It's unique to the Wrangler, I believe, and it's kind of chunky. It has a cool little gas tank-inspired shape to it as well, and you have auto start there on it, and also still does have a physical key, even though this is keyless entry and push-button start. But anyway, you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2018 Jeep Wrangler Sport. So first thing that you notice, of course, you have a very high seating position here in the Wrangler, which really helps with its excellent visibility that it has as well. I mean, view forward is really, really good. Even though you have a pretty slim windshield here, you're just sitting up so high and it's nice and wide and, you know, just a nice rectangular shape. So very easy to see forward, you know, pretty thin A-pillars as well. View out of the sides is great with these square windows. And then view out of the back is also excellent, of course, with just a large square hatch there and a good rear view mirror that helps you see all that. And then this one also has the safety package, which has the blind spot monitoring and the backup camera, all that kind of stuff. So very easy to see out of this little two-door Wrangler. Otherwise, though, you're just cruising at low speeds. You know, you can definitely feel that it has two solid axles, one in the front and one in the rear. You know, it's not a very advanced suspension setup, and so you do feel bumps, even at low speeds, a lot more than you do in any other vehicle. And that's just one of the compromises you make with the Wrangler. Although they certainly improved it, I think, and made it a little more refined than the outgoing Wrangler, it's still just, you can't fight what it's working with here. And because of that, you know, it's just a little more raw than most other vehicles. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how the Wrangler does. Here we go. Okay, so I mean, it's not slow. It gets up and goes pretty well. So the Wrangler's base engine this one has here is the 3.6 liter V6 engine, which is 285 horsepower and I believe 260 pound-feet of torque. It's not a very torquey motor, though. It's certainly a motor that likes to rev, which is kind of backwards of what you would want in a Wrangler, but it does work pretty well. There isn't any 0 to 60 time listed for these. I believe it's around 7 seconds or so, just as an estimate. But you know, that sounds about right. You know, like I said, it got up to speed pretty well. I mean, and you would think, though, although this is a smaller little vehicle with 285 horsepower, it would be pretty quick. But these do weigh about 4,000 pounds here, even in two-door guys. So it's going to be, you know, a little bit more hefty to get up and go here. But it does a really good job. It also has this brand new 8-speed automatic transmission, which really helps, because before I think it was a 5-speed automatic, which was severely outdated. This new 8-speed really helps. It's pretty responsive. I mean, it will hold a higher gear there. You know, I think it's trying to get better fuel economy, and that's what it's tuned for, more so than sportiness, because again, you're not going to be racing around in your Wrangler. But you know, whenever you do want to get up and go, it takes a second, but then it does respond. And you know, I think that the gears are nicely spaced out, so it doesn't feel like it's hunting around for gears too much or anything like that. And overall, it's pretty well behaved. Now, this one does have the larger all-terrain tires, so you hear a little bit more tire noise and road noise than you would, you know, with, again, a normal SUV or crossover type of vehicle. But that's totally fine. One other thing, though, that's really interesting is the amount of play you have in the steering here. I mean, you can see this is, I'm steering consistently around this mild corner, and I'm waving the steering wheel this much, and it's not doing anything. So the last time I had this much dead travel and play in a steering column was, I think, the 1967 Mustang that I reviewed a few years ago. Now, it's not quite as bad as an old Mustang, but it's definitely very relaxed in its response. I think most of that, though, is built in just so you don't roll this thing. If it had razor sharp steering, it'd be much more prone to rolling over, and you know, with this high center of gravity, that is one thing you have to be mindful of and be careful of. So I think they probably did that purposefully instead of it being some type of, you know, oversight or anything. It's just very different, and again, compared to any other modern vehicle, I think you will have more precise steering, but that is okay, because again, these are the allowances we make with the Wrangler. You know, because, you know, a vehicle of this type, you know, it's never going to be the best on the road, but that's not what it's designed for. It's designed for those that love going off-road, and that's its main purpose. But they have certainly improved its road manners, I think, over the previous version. And call me crazy, but I want to see how this thing handles, even with a solid front axle here. Just, you know, obviously it's a Jeep Wrangler, very high center of gravity, but this is where I think it actually has improved over the old Wrangler as far as handling goes, because you have that 1 inch longer wheelbase, and I think that really helps to give this a little more of a stable platform than before. And so because of it, I mean, clearly you cannot, you know, carve up a back road in the Wrangler still, but I think it's actually a little flatter than I remember the JK being, and so I think it's a good improvement. Again, this is not a vehicle you want to take around corners at any type of aggressive speeds. But whenever you do find yourself around a corner, you don't have to be terrified of flipping over. As long as you're going at a reasonable speed, it actually does stay pretty flat. And so, again, for a vehicle with the setup this has, by the way, this has 245, 75, 17 tires. So, a huge sidewall, lots of flex, but it actually doesn't have as much body roll as I was expecting. But there certainly is lots of lean and roll. And yeah, you don't want to get too brave though, because I feel like this thing still could get out of hand if you tried to push it too much. And I think other things to note while I'm going around these corners here, brakes are very responsive and do feel very good. I think they're a little bit larger than on the outgoing Wranglers as well, so that certainly helps. They do feel nice and strong and feel like really well done brakes. Another thing to note is the throttle response. Is pretty good. Like I said, this 8-speed is pretty quick to respond. Again, it's a little bit of a slower response, but again, we're talking about a Wrangler. We can't judge it by normal car standards. And everything does work well. It's not, like there's anything that feels overly lazy or anything. It's just everything is just set up differently in the Wrangler. As you might be able to tell, I've never been a huge fan of the Wrangler. I certainly appreciate and respect what they can do. I just went off-roading for the first time in one a couple of months ago in the old JK Wrangler there, and it was a very impressive vehicle, and what it can do from the factory, off-roading capability is amazing. But unfortunately, I know nothing about off-roading, so I'm not going to test this off-road and pretend like I know what I'm doing, because I don't. There's plenty of other reviews out there if you're more interested in the off-road capabilities. But I think, for most people that buy Wranglers, at least around here, many of them don't take them off-road and don't fully utilize what they're capable of, and so they just turn into commuter vehicles. And if you're going to buy a Jeep for commuting purposes, there's much better options to pick from that are more fuel efficient, that handle better, that are more comfortable, more refined, for way less money than Wranglers go for. So it's just one of those things, of what you want, but I feel like the niche of people that really use these and really appreciate what they are, and like them for those reasons, I think we'll just love these new ones even more so. But I'm not knocking the Wrangler whatsoever. Like I said, it has its niche of people that love it. But anyway, I had this vehicle for an entire week thanks to Jeep, and interestingly enough, I'm actually going to be road tripping this vehicle to Detroit and back here from Pittsburgh. So putting about 500 or 550 miles on it over the course of the next week or here or so. And I'll come back and give you guys all my thoughts on what it's like on a highway road trip, as well as my thoughts of just living with it for a week. And I'll come back and give you all that, as well as my final fuel economy and final thoughts. Alright, so I've been driving the 2018 Wrangler for about a week now, and I have put 678 miles on it that time, thanks to a road trip to Detroit and back. It's a really nice companion. Now, before I get into my road trip thoughts here, first I just want to mention that I got to drive it for the first time last night on some deeper snow, and this four-wheel drive mode is really great, as you would expect out of a Wrangler with all-terrain tires and this awesome four-wheel drive system. It does a really, really good job, and that's the great thing about Jeeps, is they can go anywhere, and that's especially true of the Wrangler here, and is one of the things that everyone loves about them. Other things, again, me being a sports car person, I don't love the way that it drives. It is better than the old Wrangler, but it still drives like a Wrangler, which is very good if you're a Wrangler traditionalist, and that's what you want. It certainly is more refined, but still not as refined as any other crossover competitor. And that's the thing, is the Wrangler really doesn't have any competition, so it's really hard to compare it to other vehicles. All the unique things about the Wrangler are what's unique about the Wrangler, but there are also drawbacks if you're just a casual consumer that's cross-shopping this with other crossovers. For example, speaking of the road trip, it was a great road trip companion. It cruised on the highway well, thanks to the 8-speed automatic, and it was able to basically coast at 1,700 RPMs at 70 miles an hour. But the downside of cruising at 70 miles an hour in a Wrangler is the wind noise. You get the highest amount of wind noise I've ever had in a vehicle that I reviewed, and again, that's to be expected. You have this pretty vertical windshield still. I know they raked it back a slight bit over the old Wrangler, but the boxy shape, the thin doors, all that type of stuff, you can only do so much. Just something to note. I was driving on the highway. When I first got on the highway, I was like, man, I feel like I'm in a jumbo jet flying with how much noise there is inside the cabin here, but it's not bad. And of course, you have a very powerful radio. This one has the upgraded Alpine stereo, which, like $1,200 and probably well worth it because you get the extra additional, you know, speakers and stuff that help overpower the wind noise at highway speeds and stuff like that. But again, it's not bad. I mean, I've spent 8 hours roughly, maybe actually almost 9 hours on the highway in this thing, and it's totally livable. Really, you know, not a big deal. Just something that, again, if you're coming out of a car like I am and you're used to, you know, normal vehicles, I guess this is just a departure from the rest in that regard. Speaking of my road trip though, another thing that's a departure from other crossovers is the fuel economy. Now these are rated, I think, 18 in the city, 23 on the highway. But in my time of driving, you know, over these, you know, over 600 miles on the highway, my average MPG was still only 20 miles per gallon. Now there was a little bit of driving off of the highway as well, mixed in. It wasn't purely highway, but still, I mean, 20 is 3 MPG lower, and you know, so it's not quite as good as I was expecting it to be, honestly, but that's okay. I mean, again, these are the compromises you make with a Wrangler. It has the aerodynamics of a condominium, so of course it's not going to get great fuel economy. But those that do want better fuel economy, you do have the option of the new 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, which will give you much better fuel economy as well. One other little minor complaint that I have though is whenever I was on my road trip, I flipped this back seat forward because that was the only way I could really fit my suitcases and stuff in the back of this. But there's no way that I can see to secure that rear seat. So it, you know, folds forward and then up, but it'll go back and forth. So, you know, if you accelerate hard, that back seat will then flop down and then bounce back up whenever you slow down or hit the brakes, and it'll actually bang into the rear seat if it's, or the front seats here, if it's not, you know, correctly positioned. So I don't know if I'm missing something, if there's just some reason to, or some way to, you know, secure that I don't know about, but it just flops around and it's kind of a weird oversight. You'd think they would have some way to lock that rear seat in its upright, vertical, you know, fold away position there so that you can actually put stuff back there and not have it flop around. But, you know, I don't know, like I said, maybe there's something I'm missing. And the last thing I want to mention is the price of the Wrangler. Now, this is the base sport model, but it's got basically every options package you can get on with the hardtop, the upgraded sound system, the consumer preferred package, which gives you the heated seats and the heated steering wheel, the you know, Uconnect infotainment screen, all kind of stuff. But still, remember, no leather seats in this one, just a 2-door, has the automatic, but still, this one is $40,545 as tested. And 40 grand for a 2-door cloth seat Jeep Wrangler is a kind of high in my opinion. I mean, yes, it has, you know, all the advanced off-roading stuff, and if you do actually plan to use all that off-road stuff, then I'm sure it's well worth the money. But you know, for the average consumer, once again, if you are cross-shopping this with anything, even all the other Jeep models, you get so much more vehicle for 40 grand. But, you know, anyone else who's just casually like, oh, I like the way the Wrangler looks, check out the Renegade. You get, you know, better fuel economy for a much cheaper price, a lot more equipment. Obviously, it's not going to be as off-road ready, but for those that are just using it as a daily driver, something like that, you know, has similar looks, obviously different, but you still get the round headlamps and things like that. And there's all the other great Jeep models as well. So there's plenty of other good ones to choose from if you just want something that is good on the road. If you want something that's good off-road, then again, there are other trail-rated Jeeps as well, but you know, this one is obviously the best of the best as far as off-roading goes, I think. But yeah, so again, the Wrangler isn't really my type of vehicle, but I think that it is excellent for those that do enjoy these, and I think that, you know, all the Wrangler fans out there are going to really enjoy these all-new Wranglers. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about the Wrangler in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. Huge thanks to Jeep for providing me with this Wrangler, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.